welcome everybody to the Parliament Policy Roundtable that we titled Aligning Researchers' Needs and EU-Driven Policies to Scale Up Open RRI Practices. And we are honored to introduce our policy panelists today. So we have Amalia, Verzola, the policy officer from the DG RTD from the European Commission on Open Science, and their main focus areas. Their main focus areas are science communication, public engagement, equity, and trust in science. We also have Gareth, principal consultant in open science at Technopolis Group, specializing in open science, the EOSC, research careers and research security. He is also an ambassador for Plan S under Coalition S. He's developing the EOSC Open Science Observatory and developed the research assessment framework in the Opus project. And we also have Nicola Dengo, the president of Eurodoc and assistant professor in the University of Padova in Italy. And his main focus areas include research careers, early career researchers, and sustainable research systems. Thanks a lot again for accepting our invitation. We are looking forward to great discussions. So also, as Francesca already introduced me briefly, my name is Asya Salnikova. I'm a science officer at the European Science Foundation based in Strasbourg, in France. And I'm here with my colleague Adam Brunstetter-Kunz, and we would like to start with briefly presenting you the policy recommendations that we have developed so far. In pattern, we will develop them further after today's meetings. And we'll have the final policy brief and policy recommendations report to be delivered by the very end of the project. And now I would like to give the floor to Adam for presenting the recommendations.
Thank you, Asya, and good morning to everyone. So I had the privilege to showcase a little bit our results, but I try not to be too long as to give everyone an opportunity to listen more to our panelists, as I think that I don't know about you, but I'm quite excited to hear the discussion. So without further ado, a little bit about what we developed, what we did in pattern regarding the policy context, and of course a little bit of recap. Pattern, as presented by Alessio, tried to promote new approaches to address gaps in open RRI within the students and research communities, supported institutional capacity building and provided high-quality trainings for transferable skills, to stimulate diverse careers with and beyond academia, encourage valorization of the skills and knowledge through institutionalization, and of course appropriate administrative and policy mechanisms, and focus on the needs of institutions with essential support and commitment towards sustainable adoption of those approaches. The purpose of our recommendations is to be a strategic bridge between what we did, so training outputs, training pilots, and the integration into more institutional curricula and European research policy framework. And how this bridge was structured, it was of course we needed some evidence-based, and evidence-based was from our mapping of policies and training resources, as presented by Alessio, and of course the outputs and evaluation of the pilots that were performed by our lovely partners in 14 institutions. And we translated those outputs into specific recommendations through open study methodology, which I will introduce in a couple of slides. And of course, the integration into those policy recommendations targets different groups: policymakers, founders, institutional leadership, and of course, training coordinators, as all of them are responsible to different level for setting up the overall policy and training provisions. So for evolving policy landscape, as we mapped it a couple of years ago, it still evolves and will evolve in the future. And we saw clearly over past 15 or so years, a clear shift from awareness raising about the concepts of responsible research and innovation to more structural integration, with focus on things like competence frameworks, regulations, transferability of skills, interdisciplinary mobility, boosting researchers' careers, and attracting and retaining talent. And the main drivers in the European research area were things like research assessment reform, ERA policy agenda, competence frameworks like research comp or RM comp, knowledge spread as part of funding calls in Horizon Europe, as well as other funding mechanisms, new structural policy and research careers, like mutual learning exercise on research career. And of course, in future, it will be the framework called Round 10 that will include, hopefully, some of the things as a more integrated part in the funding goals and provisions. And of course, we cannot say that it's always just the EU level, it's also global level, how it influences both national trends and institutional approaches. So, of course, from global influence, we know always UNESCO open science recommendations were heavily cited. They keep started in 21 a lot of thoughts for people. There's emphasis on capacity building, ethics, inclusivity, and societal engagement. International initiatives supporting best practices and exchanges in terms of open science. On the national level, we saw growing open science strategies, open access, fair data management, gender equality plans, research integrity, early recognition of traceable skills, but of course there's uneven infrastructure and funding for training across various countries. High institutional autonomy and implementation also was seen at the national level. In terms of institutional challenges, we see that there's quite often curriculum rigidity and accreditation constraints into how to integrate and recognize the skills, limited training resources and incentives for senior staff, uneven digital infrastructure, but of course we have also successful pilots in micro-credentials, train the trainer, and personal-based pathways for the access research delivery from R1 to R4. This can be summarized in a couple gaps: lack of harmonized monitoring system for the trainings, fragmented training platforms, insufficient modularity and adaptability of the training, something that, as mentioned by Alice already, we addressed in pattern, limited recognition in career progression, funding, the sustainability challenges, formal accreditation of the training, limited expertise to deliver training. This, of course, has implication for the potential recommendations and changes, needs for European framework on open RRI training, example like ResearchCom, alignment with exactly the ResearchCom or IronCom, integration into research careers, HR systems and curricula, and strengthened monitoring, funding, and institutional adoption. Now, how we translated the evaluation of our pilots, it was through the open study methodology. It's a co-creation approach when underlying assumption is to have a diverse group of stakeholders. So we didn't sit only with our partners that develop the training, but also invited students, research trainers, policymakers, external participants to have diverse pool of ideas. And the methodology focused on two aspects. First, divergence. So we wanted to inspire ourselves based on what happened, what we observed in training, and brainstorm to create as many ideas as possible. And then select key ideas from this brainstorming and then concentrate through co-creation and develop solutions that could address the identified challenges from this brainstorming. We did that in 3 cycles that had different focus. First, we focus on the needs and gaps in the current research training and policy landscape based on our mapping. Later, we focus on translating the pilot results from the first learning cycle into operational insights feeding back into the next piloting cycle. And finally, recently, we finalized our cycle 3 that built on the project results and co-design solutions and policy recommendations addressing both institutional and European levels. And here's a couple of examples of those solutions. Of course, I won't present all the recommendations as they will be available later on in our report, but some of the different levels. For the EU level, key challenges, fragmented training landscape, missing accreditation and platform sustainability challenges, gave us presented in the more wider strategic opportunities of upcoming framework program 10, ResearchCom framework, EU micro-credentials, and interoperable digital systems. With what we recommend as a suggested actions is to further develop EU open RRI micro-credentials and quality framework, integrate competencies developed into FP10, fund training platforms and interoperable infrastructures. For the national level, the challenges are the policy focus on compliance rather than skill development, uneven infrastructure and support services, and limited accreditation systems. And of course, here the opportunity is to adopt research or competence-based evaluation, integrate international qualification frameworks, and push from the European research area for mobility and recognition of accreditations. And suggested actions embed open RRI competences in doctoral programs, establish accreditation and quality assessment systems to ensure portability and visual recognition, and invest in national research support infrastructures. At the institutional level, the rigid curricula, as mentioned, fragmented implementation, limited incentives. Opportunity here is, of course, career progression frameworks, our access scheme, persona-based learning pathways that we developed in Pattern, interoperable digital training ecosystems, and actions embed the training in curricula and career pathways, implement modular and role-based training pathways, and improve digital usability, accessibility, and multilingual interfaces. Across all our work, we found cross-cutting enablers for the systemic integration. And these are, of course, things like community practice, holistic program design, flexible and micro-learning formats, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, digital and organizational sustainability, and global alignment with research assessment and intersectoral mobility needs. But of course, this doesn't come without risks. And as mentioned, fragmentation is still a big risk. Nominal implementation. So instead of doing something concrete, just ticking the box, quite often is what a lot of situation arises like that. Widening inequalities. Of course, we have the inequality in the countries when they are much more progressed. They are ready to implement more immediately versus the countries that will be, let's say, a little bit behind and will be slower in adopting and require more support from more overarching policies. Balance between openness of research and security. Of course, there's a big question how open we can be with our research, not to create a risk, and there's always a lot of discussions on that. Lack of resources is always an issue, not only funding, but also human resources, experience to deliver the training. So how can you deliver the training if you don't know yourself anything? So train the trainer teams are important. And of course, lack of clear incentives to engage stakeholders, as mentioned multiple times. Quite often we find that senior researchers think they know everything and they don't want to learn new things. So we need to create better incentives to engage them, so for them to become champions and lead by example the younger generation. And of course, big risk with the emerging technologies like AI and geopolitical tensions can always steer things left, right, up, down in any direction. Legacy of Pattern and how we address some of those things and wish for everyone to pick up on that is moves from individual courses to systemic competence framework and interthematic synergies. So not skills that are not just silos, but are always interchangeable and fit into each other, complementing. Open RRI structure as career stage competence, persona-based approach, providing a reference framework for institutionalizing open RRI skills in modular way, supporting integration across governance levels, funding instruments, research careers, and of course support the long-term embedding into framework program, then and of course area policies. That is more or less it from me, and I give floor back to my colleague.
We are also available to answer any questions that you might have now or after the discussion that is relevant to the policy recommendations that we are developing in Pattern. And now I suggest that we pass to the discussion with... you have... yes, please. Should I give the mic or you will? Okay.
Question for projects. Something I've been involved in different research criteria and research ethics in European funded project, and the main struggle we have, everything is nice, everything is beautiful within our bubble, but then when we try to bring what we have done outside the research criteria, research ethics bubble, there are always barriers, big walls, and the communication between us and people outside our bubbles is not that easy. So something we have to learn is how to communicate our results and our progress outside our bubble. So do you have any suggestion from the project in order to, I don't know, to connect with people outside the research, responsible research and innovation bubble in a way, or you know, training curricula outside the partner project and research, responsible research innovation bubble. Do you have any plans?
I can say something, but I don't know if you want to go first or any of you, Asya or anybody will go first.
Yeah, I think we can answer very quickly to this and then have a larger discussion afterwards.
Yeah, no, just very, very quick. What we tried to do, that is a challenge for sure. What we try to do to address this is to go to as many events as possible involving researchers, which are of course our key target group. And what we tried to push really to convince them that it will be beneficial for them to follow our trainings and to enroll is that this gives them an opportunity to pursue careers in academia and beyond. So these are skills that they can use and that they can sell even outside of the academic world, which is something that they really care about, right? Because there is this huge gap between the academia and the rest of the world. So basically what we have tried to push is this thing, and also the thing that our trainings are available online, basically open access and findable and accessible by anybody. So we have been trying to work as much as possible on this kind of accessibility and findability as well. But yeah. So something that we've done, for example, like the gender non-discrimination and inclusion model, it was also inviting speakers in the field. Like people working, say, something's connected to research and also society, local issues, for example. We had a connection with citizen science, for example, in citizen science in emergency contexts. And
But how to reach?
no, that's outside the bubble because this is actually a project that involves civil society and local organizations. So this is not an academic project, for example, and this is a project that received the Impetus Accelerator. So it's more linked with civil society organizing themselves in Ukraine, actually, to rebuild with fungi bricks.
Okay, but so how to reach people working in labs, working in art science, working in...
I know we are working in that. We are on the contrary, like linking our research to societal issues. This is what Pattern it's basically about. Through our students, for example, providing trainings, because training the next generations, these are going to be the future researchers. So we identified our target groups there because you can already...
the point.
Exactly. So one of the things is bringing to the lab and to the school. Actually, these people working also outside of academia, also bringing them another perspective and a critical perspective in our work as well. Not just the end goal of actually doing a publication, but also, how this is actually contributing to this specific societal issue. So this is what Pattern has been a bit about. So my answer is the other way around, actually, how to approach research to society and society to research through actually teaching to the new generations. So inviting these people, these local actors or these, let's say, we call them change makers, it's a trend and buzzword, but inviting them actually to teach how to engage this new generation, how this new generation could be engaged, how to be linked with these mentors, because these are not researchers, these are people working from experience. So we talk about policy, we talk about knowledge, but not about experience necessarily. So there is this kind of connection.
Sorry to add one.
There's coffee outside.
We will also have an opportunity to continue this discussion on the policy roundtable, and also
Would be willing to ask these kind of questions also, not only to us in the project, but also to our panelists. We will have a dedicated questions and answers by the very end of the policy roundtable to continue this. So now we are passing to the policy roundtable discussion, and Amalia, Gareth, and Nicola will be invited to answer the questions, and we will do it in several rounds. So the first round will be the general question asked to all of them, and we will be gathering different perspectives and different views on the general question. Then we will do 2 rounds of personalized questions, and then we'll have a light round, like sort of blitz, to finish the round table, and we will have a short question and answer session in case you would also have questions, not only to us but also to the panelists. So the first question, the general one, to all panelists. What are the skills, incentives, and support structures that researchers require to adopt open RRI meaningfully and boost their careers? Nicola, please.
Thank you very much. So we're starting with early career researchers, I guess. So this is a very interesting question, and I want you to make a little bit of an exercise and actually to change perspective, because I'm sitting here trying to represent a specific community, which is very large and very important, of the R1, R2 researchers, in layman terms, doctoral candidates and postdocs. How do I convince a doctoral candidate or a postdoc that this is important and worth to pick up? This is not an easy task, because we are talking to the same people who have probably the worst deal when it comes to the career perspective and how stable the conditions are. So they're going to focus on what matters to them. They're going to focus on what matters in the next year, where they're going to look for a job, the next year where they're going to apply for a grant. This is the name of the game for them. So we have to wonder, what is the incentive for them to focus on this instead of on staying one day more in the lab trying to get the result that will probably boost their career? There needs to be incentives on this. And for both categories, so doctoral candidates and postdocs, the incentive is probably research assessment. So what is valued in the research that you have produced, in the work that you have done? What is important? What will propel you forward? What is going to be seen positively or in a positive light in the future? This has to reflect this kind of priority also. And this requires a structural change that comes from the top. This is from the policy perspective. The second thing is about like speaking directly to people. So getting them to know this in the first place, because of course they know their reality. So we need to have this kind of skills, this kind of information, this kind of training being harmonized into doctoral education, for example. It's very difficult, and there is an appetite, at least from the university, to integrate everything harmoniously. Because a lot of times, I think this is what said before, it's, you're checking boxes, like I've done this. To be practical, even if you say, oh, you need to have, 5 credits on your resume about this in order to have a PhD, that is not going to be enough, because you know what, I'm going to start the training course, put it in the second screen and just do my stuff while the course is going. That's how I'm going to get the 5 credits. The people need to be convinced that this matters. They need to see the value, and they're going to see the value if they know that they're going to be assessed. So apart from the moral side, to be very practical, this is much a reality that we need. So harmonizing that with doctoral training, if you are a postdoc, harmonizing that with career support structures. So having someone helping you, because people just don't have the time to go and study like the whole output of the pattern project, despite its importance. You need to have someone professional that knows that understands you, understands your priority, and helps you out mapping out what you're missing and what opportunity you're missing because you don't have the skills. So I think these are my 2 cents.
Thank you very much, Gareth, please.
Yeah, I had an answer before this. Now I'm twisted into a new answer. So maybe just to start with, in terms of open science and open responsible research innovation, or these words constantly change. So I'll go with open science for the moment. I think it should be clear that open science itself, I don't think, is the goal. I think the goal is ultimately more effective, efficient, transparent research. And I think that gets lost a little bit in a lot of these discussions, because it seems like open science is the end point. One of the main phrases that's been used over the years in lots of different contexts is that open science is the new normal. And I think that's the right approach, because I think ultimately when it has been fully integrated into the system, researchers aren't thinking about this anymore. They're just doing it. So I think that's quite critical here. Now, when it comes to the skills for this, I think it's great. You had I think it was 8 categories of skills. And if you look carefully, you'll see that they're both open and transferable skills, which I think is critical. It's not just about the open science skills, right? If you dig a little bit deeper into what they currently need now, for sure they need to start understanding artificial intelligence. In what I mean by that is what it actually is, how it operates, what are the ethics of using such a tool, and how to actually use those tools. We're already seeing critical consequences of artificial intelligence across all streams of life. Some of us were putting in project proposals and review project proposals for the Commission. We've just seen a massive bump in proposals because they are being written by AI systems, and it's going to have major consequences for funding in the future, right? On top of that, we have research security, given the current geopolitics, without going into any details. So I think research security is something that's going to have to be pulled in here. And with research security, I mean specifically foreign interference, especially towards academic funding institutions, as well as understanding dual-use technologies. Maybe we'll come back to that a bit later. The last point, which I completely agree with, is research assessment. Without changing research assessment, all we're really doing here is talking, and we're stuck in an even smaller bubble. So I think it's critical that many of these skills are taken into account in assessment, both the open and transferable, because they're not. The focus really is on publications in high impact factor, glamorous magazines, which typically cost a lot of money to open up. Maybe we'll come back to that later, but there's major pushback now against open access because the decision was for gold open access, which I don't fully agree with. I understand why they went with that decision, but I think we're going to have to completely reassess this, or you're going to get a complete pushback, even worse than what's been coming from both within excellent researchers and across several countries in Europe. So it must be taken into account. We have COARA. I think we'll come back to that. But it's not enough.
Thank you.
It works. It works perfect. First of all, I would like to let you know that I will try not to fall down from this chair. So, okay, I will do my best. So let's start, because you asked about skills. You asked about also support structures and also initiatives. So first of all, I would like to congratulate you because you did an excellent job. And really, I'm very happy also to be here and to discuss this topic, which is very important, especially today, considering the challenges that we are facing, right? When we talk about researchers, I think it's very important to equip them with the skills that are needed to engage with society in an effective and efficient, valuable manner, right? This is why we're here. And from my perspective at the Commission, I would say that we would require all these 3 segments that you mentioned, meaning skills, initiatives, and support structures. But I will dive deep into the skills now. And also you have to know that I am a former researcher and a former journalist, so perhaps I might be a bit biased, but I will try to answer properly. When we talk about skills, I would say that we need for researchers to have technical skills and transversal skills. Well, technical skills, because when we talk about open RRI, we talk about FAIR principles. We talk about open access publishing. We talk about what else? Research data management, no? And this is why researchers need to know what they're dealing with. This is why data literacy is very much important. When it comes to transversal skills, for sure, communication is a very important element. This is why also trainings with science communication professionals surely is very valuable to consider, because researchers need to understand how to translate concepts that are difficult to understand for the layman audience in a very simple and straightforward manner, right? And then let's move to initiatives. I would say that researchers would need initiatives that put at the core of the everyday research practice Open RRI. And I will now talk about Open Research Europe, just to give you an example, which is this platform launched by the Commission 5 years ago. And then I will also, perhaps if I have the time, talk about the next phase of Open Research Europe later. So this platform allows for researchers, for EU-funded researchers, to have access to high-quality scholarly publishing without author fees. This is interesting because it allows for early career researchers or also researchers coming from underrepresented regions, to publish, because the platform removes financial obstacles. So this is very interesting. And then we have indeed Horizon Europe, which, as my colleague Georgios explained, basically embeds Open RRI and Open Science into its funding calls. Then last point, support structures. I agree with my colleagues, indeed. So I will try also not to, say again and again, talk again about research assessment, but this is very much important because me too, I was a researcher. So if I need to, I am passionate about communication. So this is another story, but not everybody is passionate about communication and not everybody has the skills. So we have to create incentives for them, for the researchers, to engage in activities dealing with the publics, I would say, plural, because we have different publics as well. And so this is why research assessment is an important support structure, but also indeed universities, research centers, offices dealing with societal engagement and ethics. Their role is important to lead, to accompany researchers, and also in a way to, to ease the friction between the classical world of researchers, and then the uptake of new practices such as Open RRI, right? So to wrap up, because I don't know if I have the time, let's wrap up. I think that for researchers to meaningfully adopt Open RRI, we need a perfect mixture of these three segments of work, so skills, initiatives, and support structure. So thank you very much for this question, but now I will give you again.
Thank you very much, Amalia. Thank you, everybody. And now we are passing to the first round of personalized questions. And we are back again to you, Amalia. With the question, how the EC has been supporting the adoption of Open RRI in recent years. So maybe the main initiatives again, and how intends to move forward. What are the future directions?
Okay. So, first of all, I joined the commission, the unit in charge of open science policies only 5 months ago. So I will try to give you a snapshot of the main initiatives undertaken by the commission in this field. Because over recent years, indeed, the commission has really conducted an important work to embed Open RRI into research practices across Europe, right? And again, I will repeat myself, but Horizon Europe is a very important, milestone, let's say, a key avenue, because it embeds Open RRI practices into the funding calls, which means that we support researchers who really think about involving society in each and every step of the research process, and also researchers who conduct research in a transparent and responsible way. But then also I would like to mention infrastructure, even if this is not really my field of expertise, but I could mention the European Open Science Cloud, and then I'm sure that Gareth also will talk about that. The EOSC is basically a virtual environment where researchers can store data, manage data, reuse data, etc. And this is important because it supports indeed open data practices, which is also one of the pillars of Open RRI. And then again, Open Research Europe. So now I will talk about also the next phase of Open Research Europe, which kick-started basically recently in March, so a few weeks ago. We will have now the support of funding institutions across Europe, and we have already 11 countries who committed to support the new phase of Open Research Europe. That means that the eligibility to use the platform will expand significantly, because also the researchers coming from these countries will be able to publish without fees. And this is a very important initiative also because it is equitable, but also proposes innovative approaches to research, which is, for example, the use of open peer review. And then, indeed, again, research assessment. We support initiatives such as COARA, the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment. So it's important for the Commission to make sure that we really try to make sure that incentives are created for researchers to really practice Open RRI. Let's say if a researcher wants to, I don't know, participate in a science outreach event, it would be for sure beneficial if he knows that the participation will then, as a consequence, also help him or her advance in his or her career, right? And then last point perhaps that I would like to mention is the ERA policy agenda, because we really try to make Open RRI a reality, so something which is structural, a sort of skeleton which is there across Europe, and not simply a tick-the-box exercise, or rather a sort of project-led practice. And also, what do we plan to do? I would like to mention here a very interesting initiative we are working on with my colleagues over there. We have, under the current ERA policy agenda, we have a very important action, which is applying equity in open science. Because we are here, we talk about Open RRI, but are we sure that everybody, I mean, I'm talking about the researchers now, of course, because this is the focus of our discussion. Are we sure that they can really, everybody can access, for example, infrastructures, or I don't know, other elements than that now I don't have in my mind. So what we try to do now is that we try to collect and gather evidence to understand the main challenges, and then propose policy recommendations, and also develop a EU-wide approach to equity in open science. So to wrap up, the Commission, as you could hear, and also as you know, I'm sure, has conducted different actions in parallel to make Open RRI feasible, but also relevant for career advancement. But we have to do more. I'm talking as Amalia Verzola, not as me. Voilà.
Thanks a lot, Amalia, for your opinion. Now the question for Gareth. What opportunities exist to harmonize training frameworks, accreditation, and evaluation criteria across member states?
Before I start, I'm just going to quickly call our colleagues at the door, who are doubling at the rate of about every 10 minutes. There are seats over here on the right side if you want to take them and move forward. So first of all, at the European level, I think Horizon Europe is extremely important. Not just Horizon Europe, there are others, but Horizon Europe for certain. On top of that, then, we have a lot of agreements in place across member states. We have, for instance, a council recommendation on research careers. It's quite extensive. There's a lot in there on research. We have a pact for RRI. We have data acts. We have the ERA Act, which is coming, right? So at least at member state level, we are looking towards certain types of alignment, although they often do not go into detail. Specifically looking down maybe at organizations, the European Open Science Cloud was mentioned. I think this is quite critical, at least in the domain of data. So for those of you who are not aware, the European Open Science Cloud is basically a web of data. So you all understand the internet. This is a web of hyperlinked texts. Very simply put, think of this as an orthogonal overlaid internet of data, where you have interconnected, interoperable data, which you can hook up, hopefully in the future, and run a query on, and it will look across the data sets. Maybe if we're lucky with advanced machine learning, it will actually understand what's there and be able to do something more groundbreaking, right? So the European Open Science Cloud is bringing together a lot of organizations, not just at member state level, but across domains, down to individual research groups. Idea there being that we need to have one common agreement on what the interoperability should be, and that is the FAIR principle. So I think that's quite clear. Then when you look at the organizations, you have organizations like Science Europe, for instance, which tries to align across funders. You have many university organizations aligned in different groupings, let's say. So you have the European University Alliance, but you have a whole shopping list of other associations who are trying to align. It is, of course, the question, are they aligning with each other or are they aligning in specific groups? And then on top of that, an excellent initiative from the Commission recently has been the University Alliances. So the idea here was to take universities across different countries in one group, let's say, and then get them to integrate, first in terms of education, training thus, but now also in terms of research, and try to bring those together. But there is a limited number of alliances, and there is, of course, a specific focus that each will have. So again, the question there is, to what extent are they just aligning with each other, or are they aligning a bit more broadly? That said, I'm quite positive, having to review many of these and look at many of them. They do seem to be forming a direction on where they're going. I just don't think they always agree on the details.
Great. Thank you very much, Gareth. And the question for Nicola. From the early career researcher's perspective, how do we balance bottom-up, meaning researcher-driven, and top-down, policy-driven approaches sustainably to keep policies researcher-centered and responsive to disciplinary and sectoral diversity?
Thank you very much. And I think I do have a deceptively simple answer to the question, which is basically representation. So in other words, what is being asked is that how do I gather feedback from the end users of this kind of training? I need to ask them. I need to do that in a way that makes sense. So I cannot just drag someone out of a room and just interview this person. It needs to be someone who is aware of the whole process, who has an understanding. This requires structural representation, and we know that especially at doctor candidates level, and especially R2 level, so postdocs, this is not a reality, especially R2 level. It's very hard to implement some kind of participation to governance, some kind of inviting people at the table with a cohort of people who are, because of how the system is shaped and functions currently, very scattered, very precarious, that continuously move around, so they don't develop that knowledge. So even like people from from the top are frustrated because they don't find people who can engage effectively. So we need to identify a way to actually extract this information, making people to participate to the process. And it might sound like self-advertising. It is not. It's something that we really, really stand behind, and just something that is missing. We are doing our part as a Eurodoc. We're trying to engage with the European Commission as much as possible, with every stakeholder in the field as much as possible. But when we go down at a national level, at the local universities, that type of engagement, that fine-grained feedback needs to be there as well. And now we have a wide array of examples of situation where university try to do that, member states try to do that, not always successfully. So we need to really introduce best practices. We need to use probably also the ERA Act to stimulate this participation from the bottom, from the researchers themselves.
Thank you very much, Nicola. And Now I would like to pass to the second round of personalized questions. And again to Nicola. What is missing in your views in the current landscape of skills frameworks and training materials that would support early career researchers in their future? Or maybe how the existing approaches and resources could be better used to help them?
Again, here I'm risking repeating something that was already said extensively. And here again, the short answer is 1,000 pattern projects. So this was very important, like having a wide overview of what is missing, how to develop something that is harmonized, that can be just picked up. Because currently we can see there is an appetite of good quality training that can be integrated into doctorate program, that can be integrated to support services to early career researchers. And a lot of time, people like literal professionals standing inside university offices are scrambling, trying to find a way to provide this in a meaningful way, and the offer is not there. And so these kind of initiatives are very important, but they need not to stop here. They need to, grow into something that is more structural, so that like they can really drive good adoption. Because currently, lack of available materials leads to lack of widespread adoption. That's basically the direction and what is really missing. So probably to just restate, pattern, bigger, better, larger. This is probably my recipe.
Thank you very much, Nicola. The question for Gareth. How open should we be in building a more open and responsible future in an age of geopolitical conflict and artificial intelligence? We have already mentioned the current issue of the balance, very fragile balance of the openness of research as well as research security. So this is our opportunity to talk about it.
Okay, so I'm going to not try to be a doomsayer, but just reflect on what I see. Yeah. So maybe first off, I've been thinking over the many years of this statement by the Commission, particularly, as open as possible, as closed as necessary. And when I first heard it, as many who are shaking their head here, I thought that means absolutely nothing. Like you tell a researcher that they haven't a clue what to do with it, so that gets put in the bin immediately. But over the years, I've realized it's actually quite on the spot, because ultimately it will come down to case-by-case situation for every research that's done. You really have to look at the research that's being done and understand what should be open here, if anything, and if so, to what extent do we open this? And there's a whole spectrum of questions there. So first of all, is this dual-use technology? If it is, it should absolutely not be open. Is this biomedical or security or intelligence related? You name it. It should not be open. It shouldn't be connected, perhaps even. If that's not the case, then we come into the domain of, okay, what can be opened and what should be open? Should we open every version of a 1 gigabyte or 1 petabyte data set? Absolutely not. So do we only open the final version, or do we only open the final version that's related to a publication? And who's going to store all of this if we are, by the way, doing it? Who pays for all of this? So there's a lot of questions that go there into what should be opened. Now, maybe the bigger question is not just what we open now, but when we look forward, right? I'll come back to the EOSC or any web of federated, interconnected, interoperable open data in a moment. A lot of the discussions now over the last year, maybe 2-3 years, has been the types of openness that we take. And we've decided, as I said, on gold open access to a large extent from funders. And it's causing major pushback. We're spending incredible amounts of public taxpayer money on publications. I'm in an advisory board of a project of MSCA, PhDs and postdocs. I've had PhDs come to me saying, I need to be open because of the Commission, and I really want to be open. However, the only publication I can publish in is €5,000, and I don't have the budget in my project. So they go to the project can't pay it. They go to the university can't pay it. They go to the faculty, they don't want to pay it. They go to the professor, he, at this particular moment, doesn't want to pay it. So they're now stuck in this crazy quagmire where they're being forced to be open, but they can't. Now, they can go to Open Research Europe, but I hate to say it's not prestigious. And for an excellent candidate like this, they're not getting a career if they publish not in high impact factor journals. So the type of openness is a question. Now, to the future, one of the issues I see coming with the creations of these large interconnected data sets, EOSC is not there yet at that scale that we're talking about, but it hopefully will be in a number of years. When you have such massive interconnected data sets and actual machines that can understand what's in there, we start moving beyond our typical process of doing science. We start hitting breakthroughs that we would never have thought of in exponential time, especially as that aligns with clever machine learning systems. We can call it artificial intelligence. It's not intelligent, but at least it operates. Now, the problem I see is that data that we open now, which we see is not dual-use technology or not dangerous, could potentially in the future, with trillions upon trillions of data points, ultimately lead to dual-use applications. If you have such an enormous interconnected data set that's out there and open, machines in the future can, of course, start either recreating or rebuilding pieces that are there for dangerous uses. So we don't even know at this current time, putting what we do out there in the name of openness, how that may come back to bite us in the future. And it's a serious question, I think, that needs to be addressed. The last point is that I think this should be ethical. So when Ebola hit many years ago, this was in, I think it was Western Africa, the data was ultimately opened, except the data crossed the boundaries of the countries that it was afflicting. And the consequences of that was that they didn't own the data anymore. And these countries are, of course, not happy about this, that their data to support the outbreak and was used positively has now become owned and used by non-actors, state actors from those countries. So now we hear this talk of data visiting versus data sharing, right? The ownership stays within the country. You come in and visit, but you don't own it and you don't set the laws. You have to abide by the owners of the data, right? So I think there's a lot of questions. I hope more questions on this will come up a bit later, but there is a lot to think about in terms of openness. Now, Mark, I'm not saying that we should not be open. What I am saying is that we should be very clear on the conditions that we're being open. It should be case by case for each research, and we should be looking foresightfully forward on what we are opening and potential consequences, given the changing geopolitical climate at the moment.
Thanks a lot. It's also a very important topic, and we will have an opportunity to discuss it in more detail afterwards. And the question for Amalia. Why is it important for researchers to engage with citizens, and how investing in their capacities to engage with society at large help foster trust in science?
Thank you. Well, what can I say? Trust in science and equipping researchers with the skills needed to engage with society in an effective manner, to me, is pretty straightforward. Meaning that researchers have to not only produce high quality, I prefer to say, high quality knowledge, but also they have to learn how to consider society in each and every phase of the research process, because this indeed can foster trust in science. Now, if we talk about engagement, I think that we could mention many aspects, but I will try to stick only to a few ones, because otherwise I guess that we would not have the time. So I would say that engaging citizens and residents as well in the research process is important, because in this way, and I would like also to stress before going ahead, each and every step of the research process, not only one. This is important because it will allow to produce research outcomes which are more impactful and in line with the needs of society as a whole. Then another aspect is engaging underrepresented audiences and citizens and residents. Again, this is an important thing that I want to stress, because in this way we can make sure to involve in science not only the usual suspects, if you see what I mean. And then I think about two aspects, so dialogue and transparency. These elements are very important to boost trust in science. So dialogue, because we have to create, I think, spaces in which researchers can engage with the citizens, in a fruitful manner, constantly, persistently, continuously. And then transparency, because also they have to learn how to communicate about the main challenges of their work, like, for example, dealing with uncertainty. And we saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm sure that we can also draw lessons on that experience. But we certainly agree here that these skills are not really natural. I mean, they can be natural in certain people, researchers, but otherwise, this is why we're here and we're talking about training them. And then, if you allow me, I would like to go back to the RRI policy agenda, because we have a strong focus on citizen science, citizen engagement, public engagement in science to foster the trust in science. And we have specifically a structural policy that was kicked off in December to really establish a nice and interesting European-wide community of practice on this very topic. And in this framework, we will also indeed try to understand how to strengthen the skills of researchers when it comes to engagement. And then, if you allow me, I would like to perhaps conclude on a personal note, because I told you I was a researcher, a journalist. I was many things, now I don't remember anymore. I also worked at the University of Lyon in a science shop. I will tell you briefly what are science shops. These are entities for participatory research support in response to concerns experienced by civil society and citizens in general, right? So when I was there, I could really see how for researchers to really conduct this type of activity was beneficial, not only for them, but also and specifically to really build long-lasting relationships with the communities. And why do I say long-lasting relationships? Because to me, engagement is not a tick-the-box tokenistic activity. Okay, we did it, fantastic. So one-off, thing. It's something that has to be really persistent, and this is also the only way to really have an engagement with society which is impactful. And to conclude and wrap up, I would say that this is why we are all here, equipping researchers with the skills needed to conduct, open RRI in an effective manner and engage with society and stakeholders in an effective manner is indeed of paramount importance. So I would conclude with that.
Thanks a lot, Amalia. It was an excellent combination of research background and policymaker background. So thanks a lot for providing this. And we would like to open the floor for interactive part of the Policy Roundtable and invite you to ask questions to our panelists. Please raise your hand and ask a question. You are very welcome. Yes, please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Carolina from EXA, the European Citizen Science Association. So many questions. I will try and concise that into one. I was also a researcher and passion about public engagement and so on, so I understand what you mean. My question is, I feel like we live in a bubble, at least a lot of us here, and we discuss these things a lot, especially with researchers, how to make them more engaged with public engagement. My question is from the top, for instance, from the European Commission, how much public engagement is there, or how much consultation with the wider public is there in defining these agendas, and how much is more from a political pressure point of view? And also, you said something about citizens and residents, and I extend the question I was under the assumption that when we use the word citizens, at least in citizen science, we mean everyone. So then what about refugees and migrants? I would just be curious if I've been working under a wrong assumption.
Is it a question for Amalia or for all panelists? Okay, thank you very much. Amalia, please.
Hi. Happy to see you again. No? I can start perhaps, Carolina, with why I mentioned residents. Well, also I have a background in migration. So I worked a couple of years for an international organization on migration. And to me, there are people who are part of, the territories who do not have citizenship. So I understand also that, for example, EXA, so European Citizen Science Association, I agree. It's not straightforward, but still, it's just a way for me. I made this, distinction to somehow stress that we have to reach also different audiences, if you see what I mean. And I will give you an example. Again, Lyon, the University of Lyon. When I was working there, we went to difficult neighborhoods, even if I don't like to say difficult neighborhoods, but you understand what I mean. And we organized in those areas science outreach events. So this was a way to really engage with not the core, if you see. And then this is my answer to the second part of the question. So let's go back to the first one. So you asked, if I remember correctly, if the Commission engages with different audiences. Yeah, as I told you, I joined this unit only 5 months ago, but also I have around 3 years of experience at the Commission before in other services. And I can tell you that the Commission does that. I can tell you that. For example, also the RRI policy agenda is built in collaboration with the member states, with associated countries and stakeholders. So then otherwise also I've got other examples where, while we are here talking about research and innovation, but there are also other areas in which the Commission really takes on board the opinions of citizens as well, like, for example, citizens panels or similar activities. So I don't know if I answered your question enough. Is it okay? Okay, good. I don't know if my colleagues want to.
Well, I was just thinking of the bubble earlier on from our colleague and wondering what I meant by public engagement. So I don't think it means reaching out to everybody or the public. I think critically, you have to identify who is actually interested or potentially interesting for my research or my project work, right? I used to have a colleague at Leiden who worked on medieval manuscripts, and his research was perfect for everybody. He would show these old pictures from manuscripts 1,000 years ago and then put funny memes on them. And he had 100,000 followers on an app I won't name. So it was perfect, right? He was reaching out to everybody. I used to work in theoretical linguistics. So good luck sharing abstract theoretical models with the public, and never mind a physicist and so forth, right? I was in a project where we worked on research assessment. The results are really not interesting for most people. They're interesting for universities, maybe funders, maybe some state level actors, but they're not interesting for everybody. My family doesn't care what I do. So, and I don't tell them because I'm not going to waste their time on a lot of this, right? So I think you have to identify who is this useful for, and then try to reach out to them.
I think I'm going to just quickly answer yes. I think we can also go back to the point of representation, like how do you give voice, and what is the European Commission doing, and what are the elements of this conversation are doing. I think the European Commission is doing a nice work on that from that perspective. Of course, it is never going to be enough. I'm never going to say that it is enough. But I also have to say that a lot of time, the difficulties that we are seeing are lower at the member state level, or even lower at more regional level or the university level. So again, like reaching out to people means having good representation. That structure is not there in a lot of cases. Depends. Your mileage may vary.
Thank you very much, all of you. Yes, another question? Yes, please.
Thanks a million. Also, as a former journalist and researcher, I would be interested in how are you dealing, that's more a question to you, Amalia, with the newer forms of societal discourse. So in previous years and decades, there were trained journalists who were taught to really deal and respect the principles of journalism, of good, proper, transparent sources and asking both sides in a matter and so on and so on. But we all know this has changed over the past years, and many untrained people have now, for the better or the worse, possibilities with podcasts and with many other forms on the web and so on to influence the societal discourse. And there's also the matter of emotionalization and personalization. And I think this goes maybe way... We are in our bubble occasionally, but the bubble does influence how the discourse is formed, and this in turn does influence what you will be doing or what everybody is doing. How is this taken into account in the next future steps?
Thanks a lot.
I know.
What can I say? First of all, well, my perspective is the perspective of a person working in the unit in charge of open science policies. So just to tell you that perhaps I could share my feeling, but I cannot really talk for other services that are certainly in charge of that. For example, there is a specific task force at the Commission in DG Com, which is in charge of really dealing with disinformation, right? So perhaps they would be more fit to answer the question. But what I can tell you is that this is an important topic for us when we also link it with science communication, which is, as I also explained, an important focus of the current policy agenda, because we have this sectoral policy also using, in a way, exploiting, if you allow me the term, science communication to foster trust in science. I would say that what is important here is really from the perspective of the Commission, perhaps, and then my colleagues can also add something in case there is the need. But for me, I would say that also the work conducted by the project, so developing communities of practice, such as, for example, Coalesce, this very nice project, and I have a colleague there who follows the outcomes of the project, is something important, because by developing a community of practice that can discuss these topics, and bring the spotlight on that, we certainly do something and we move forward, So this is something. And then I think that, what can I say? Also, I study specifically populism, so this is also a question which somehow rings a bell to me, but now I have to stick to the Commission. So this is something we have to consider, we have to really be alerted upon. And then I would say that depending on what happens, we react. But in any case, there is a specific service at the Commission. And in case you would like to know more, you can for sure check what they are conducting, because they work specifically on the topic of disinformation.
Thanks, Amalia. Would Gareth or Nicola, you would like to react also, please?
Well, maybe two things. This is a personal reflection, but the first one is that I sincerely question the journalistic profession since the advent of social media. I'll be very blunt. I read a lot of newspapers, and I've seen a sincere degradation of journalistic integrity and reporting since social media has come. I understand it's for funding streams and control of media, but I do question what we're reading these days. And I'm not talking about disinformation, but the selection of the information that we get. Disinformation, I understand, but it's the selection. The second thing is, I don't see any issue with this explosion of alternative news outlets, right? It's up to us as individuals to filter out what we think is relevant and real. Of course, the problem is echo chambers. I think the problem is education, that most people these days do not seem to be critically reading what they get, do not understand where to go for true information or understanding what is disinformation and how to filter. And at least from my experience with, having a lot of friends, they read the article title and then they have an opinion without having actually read the article, which typically does not reflect the title, right? So I think we need to be pushing critical understanding down into primary schools at this stage. I don't know if it's there. I don't think so, but I think that's where we have to go these days.
Thank you, Gareth. Any other question? Okay. I will go there. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. I would like to react to what you said about public engagement and reaching out to people who are already interested. I find that clashes a little bit with the second part that you said, because the Eurobarometer actually shows that 35 or 37% of people who don't engage with science and technology is because of a lack of interest. But those are most likely the people who are reading everything on social media and the headlines and are believing it. So don't you think that if we need to reach outside of this bubble, that in fact we should be putting effort into engaging with the people who are not at all interested in science?
Thank you.
Okay, so in my defense, I said two things, right? I said interested, so those who are interested, and for those who it is interesting. So the first category is the one you're talking about. The second one, some of them, of course, are this group, right? I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think we should reach out to everybody. It's not possible. And specifically in the context of projects like this, it's definitely not possible. Short-term duration, low budgets, you don't have the reach. But yes, I do think we should reach out to those who are not necessarily interested, but could potentially be interested, or it could be useful for them. But that comes back to the identification. You have to select. So you have to run some kind of stakeholder mapping and identify who is this actually potentially interesting for. The interested ones are a given. They're the handy ones, right? But then you have to try and figure out, how do I reach these people? So yes.
Thank you. Other reaction? Sure.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to say also that if we manage to reach interested audiences, then perhaps these audiences could act as amplifiers towards the other ones. So this is just an idea that I had. So,
Nicola?
Very quickly, I think already reaching the ones that could be interested is incredibly difficult. So it's something that is very hard to do. Reaching outside is even more difficult. Maybe one thing that I want to say is that let's not forget that science communication is also a job, and there is a right way to do that. And so some of the burden can be put on top of individual researchers having like the knowledge on how like communication works, but really engaging people who doesn't have any interest or understanding at some point requires specific skills and education. So these things has to be balanced, and yeah.
Amalia, you wanted to add something? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. Another question? Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, they made me stand up. It's not because I want to show my face, but so my background is mostly in health, so I might be biased with the following question. But I would like to have Gareth's opinion about first of all the possibility to extend the concept of synthetic data that is often used for medical data in other domains, so to allow having open data in different projects. And something more general, I've heard a lot about talking on co-creation. At least for clinical trial, there's been a very strong push of involving patient organizations from the get-go when they have to design those. Don't you think that it might be useful to take on board PIs, professors, not just really early researchers, but the ones that might stay with the projects, and having a sort of organizations that can direct the research line in order to involve people from the outside and possibly amplify the impact that the projects can have on civil society at large. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I missed the collocation of words on data. What was the word before data that you used? Synthetic. Can you explain what you mean by that so I can answer?
So this is a big problem, for example, in rare diseases. There are very few people. Some of the data are easily recognizable when there are 130 patients in the world having one disorder. So one idea is that there's, if you imagine, for example, a time series, you can change it in a slightly way so that the data reflects all the structure of the original one. So it's still informative for whatever reasons research you want to have, but it is not true. Like it is artificial, and in that sense, it complies with the GDPR, and because it is basically from no one, so it can be more easily shared. Now, I don't know whether this can be applied to other domains as well, but so this is why I wanted to have your thoughts on that.
Thanks.
Okay, maybe 2 points then on this, right? So the first one is non-synthetic data, so the real data. Obviously, it should not be put out there, right? And of course, you have this tension of the less, I'll rephrase this, the less metadata that you put on it, the less useful it is, right? So what I would say to this is for specific data, let's say biomedical data or sensitive data, there is no issue with having this conform the FAIR principles, but not be open. It does not have to be open. It can stay closed, fully conforming to the FAIR principles. The critical point here is that with a closed data set, you can still run queries. You have to set up, of course, security measures, but you can run queries, algorithms on a closed data set without seeing the data and get responses back. So a closed data set can still be used and be useful, right? Of course, you need to understand roughly what's in there. Of course, it needs to be trusted, but I assume there's procedures in place for this to happen, right? So without even altering the data, it does not have to be open. You can, of course, open certain parts of it, but it can be critically exploited, closed, assuming it follows certain principles, right? And assuming you know the algorithms. For synthetic data, I don't see any issue as long as it's truthful to the original data, and that's where I have a very big question mark. We're not talking about encrypted data. We're talking about slightly altering it, right? I mean, if I know how you slightly altered it, I can reconstruct the original data, right? I guess. So I have a question mark on the translation there. But in principle, if you can translate that faithfully, then I don't see an issue. It should, of course, be clear this is a synthetic data set. And to some level of degree, this is what we did with it, not giving me the encryption key. On the representation, there's this sentence which I always get wrong. I think it's not about us without us. I mean, I fully agree. I don't see why setting up principles and protocols, you cannot include individuals, for instance, who are giving the data or those who critically are engaged in this, right? I do not think you should just be making policies for people without pulling them in. So absolutely, they should be involved there from the beginning, if not right after the beginning, but certainly not at the end when we know nothing's going to change.
Thank you. Any other reaction? Okay, then we have a time for the last question. Okay, Angela.
Thank you very much. I'm Angela Simone from the Reinforcing Project. I have a sort of follow-up of what Nicola said about competencies and skills on science communication and public engagement. Of course, for me, it's absolutely important to keep researchers with competencies and skills, basic competencies and skills on science communications and public engagement. But if we would like to pursue stable, persistent public engagement activities, we need experience, expertise, and maybe researchers can't have this kind of experience and expertise. We cannot say that apart from technical competencies, entrepreneurial expertise, they also need to have this strong competence on science communications and public engagement. So they need support from professionals. So it's okay to have training, but maybe we need to rethink all the paradigm and think about careers within the institutions, roles within the institutions on science communications, public engagement to support researchers. As we have data stewards, as we have research managers that can support researchers in doing better their job also in terms of public engagement. So I would like to know if the PATTERN consortium has explored this opportunity, this new role for this specific topic, which is absolutely relevant in the context of open responsible research innovation. But also I would like to have the perspectives of the panelists today on this.
Thank you, Angela. So we'll start with the panelists. Yes, Amalia, please.
Yes, Angela, very nice question. I think that also in my first answer, or the second, now I don't remember anymore, but I referred to the fact that we need this kind of profiles to really make the liaison and also to reduce the friction between, the world of researchers as it is now. I'm not thinking about an ivory tower, but let's think about the worst case scenario, okay? And then the uptake of these practices. So for sure, we need this kind of profiles, science engagement professionals, people managing also European projects who deal, these people who can deal and can understand these topics. So I totally agree with your take. I cannot add anything else.
Thank you. I think this is very true, very important. And I have anecdotal examples about this because I've saw this kind of a problem, this kind of opportunities, kind of a hit and miss happening directly into research performing institutions. For example, you have science communication is something that you can pivot into when you are a researcher if you decide to go in that direction, but you need to acquire expertise, knowledge, and so on and so forth. But you can make it a little bit like your career and your pathway. By being a research performing organization and you have that opportunity, you see someone going in that direction, you have a choice to make. You either accept that like you have now this kind of opportunity to, I don't want to say use, but like really make use of these competences and this person that has developed this interest, or to go against this. And I saw that happening, and I saw that some people trying to do that and actually being an issue inside the department because they were spending less time by doing raw research, and the whole assessment method meant that the department was receiving less money because they have a less productive researchers, despite this person being extremely successful into science communication. So we have the opportunity. That opportunity needs to be leveraged, and there needs to be a structure that propels these people and allows them to be properly rewarded.
Thank you. Gareth, would you like to react? Okay. So from the PATTERN consortium, I would like to give the floor to Muki for his remark.
Yes. So you ask about what PATTERN has done, and mostly the material in PATTERN, of course, is designed for early career researchers in different levels. So in terms of its foundational level or intermediate. But among the things that we created was also a competency framework for citizen science together with the ECS project. It's called CITSI-Comp. It will come out in June. And actually it's designed exactly for helping those people who are getting into professional career within citizen science to identify their competencies, their competency level, and to develop it. And the hope is that this type of mechanisms will allow them to do that. And then there is Coalesce, who are doing similar work, and the Academy on science communication. And again, that will be a pathway for people to understand that. So a bit of the work within pattern was about those pathways and those development of competencies. So it's there, it's not directly in the material, but it's in foundational stuff that will come out of it.
Thank you very much, Muki. And so we are arriving to the end of the policy roundtable. And to wrap up, we have a very lightning round of blitz of very short questions that we would like to ask to the participants to wrap up. Please continue the sentence. Each of you in turn. Open RRI skills are important because?
It's the only way forward to have sustainable research.
It's going to sound like a slogan. Yes. The future is open if we want an open society.
Cool. Could you please repeat the...
Open RRI skills are important because?
Because we need a new generation of researchers.
Thank you very much. Second question, also a very short one, but more complicated in my view. Having knowledge in blank is essential in today's and future research. Please fill in the blank with one open RRI skill that you seem the most important today.
I'm going to pick a different one. It's going to be management and leadership. Because at the end, you're going to deal with people.
I'm going to follow this rebellious trend. AI and research security.
Me, I'm biased, so it will be citizen science.
Thank you very much. We would like to thank our panelists for their answers and participation, also the audience for your questions.